Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Right now it's 2 degrees Celsius in Etobicoke, Canada. It snowed earlier today. I'm wearing 3 jackets. I thought that I attempt to give a talk before it becomes too unbearable to stay outside and give it. Today I found myself experiencing a profound moment of contemplation. I was having one of those, waiting in your car, looking outside of your window diagonally towards the sky sort of contemplations. I thought about the relationship of human beings with human beings, and I thought about the relationship of human beings with concepts and ideology. And I suddenly felt I noticed a pattern. I noticed something that is going on in the human conscious experience that is noteworthy to speak about. The way I managed to phrase it is that human loneliness is an intellectual opportunity. And that in the subtitle I've written, we understand concepts like people. I would say that as someone who has attempted to write science fiction, one is burdened with the task of creating a world. I have thought about creating characters in like a sci-fi world. And eventually one comes down to the motivation of why the human being is moving and why the human archetype is relevant. Personally, I feel the human species in 2022 is becoming more acquainted with a nature of reality that is neither objectively limited or neither subjectively limited. Pretty much in my observation of human psychology, one has to first see what worlds are accessible and then what are the limits of those worlds. I've written a sentence here. Human loneliness causes the human being to seek involvement and engagement with conception if with people it isn't possible. What I'm suggesting is that in my observation, of the human position, I have discovered that there is an urge, and more than we are acting like people. The members of our species are acting like people. More than that, prior to acting people, we have been acting as a force. And for the longest time in our evolutionary in the phases of evolution, there was a moment where this creature was mobile without knowing it's mobile, which is another way of saying we were moving without realizing we were moving. This suggests that the core of every human experience is not an idea of a self, but is an energetic force. There's a force that moves us. There's a force that is even moving me within this moment. Now, to contemplate about the depths of this force is to contemplate about how the free will moves in the moment. The brain seems to be an intelligence that knows its power to some degree. To be conscious as a human being is to log into an elemental reality, an elemental video game, and in some sense knowing the capability of your character and then decisions being made based on that. I thought about it, what did our ancestors do? That I was reading in the World Health Organization, depression statistics are rising all over the planet, and there was a question of, first, how would you conduct such a massive survey, but at the same time, depression suggests that the anxiety of the future has shackled us in the past. What I have noticed is that I kind of got the clue from how I observed that I asked my, pretty much I've observed, or I should say differently, I have asked and wondered about how human beings before me were living, including my own parents, grandparents, and whatnot, and also studying history to some degree. And I have noticed something fascinating, that the technological development, I think it started from the Industrial Revolution, or maybe it even started when we learned language as creatures. Part of the idea of being a civilized human being was to be a creature that was separate from its environment and could act differently to its environment. The human species has been pushed into this way of living life where are limited. Think of consciousness being a circle, and then think of the unconscious being a greater circle. We started in the unconscious, the creature that is instinctually bound to its environment. It's like a creature's instinct is another way of saying how the environment has programmed the creature to behave. Something in the human experience through, I think it's really the development of self-awareness has allowed the creature that we are to separate itself from the world to feel a sort of independence. So in other words, from an unconscious dependence to nature, certain events have taken place and we have become conscious, independent agents, natural beings in nature. Now, why am I saying this is because I wondered about the intention of the human beings that have lived before we have, and I have wondered about how is their karma still in motion. So imagine there's someone who wanted to do something on the planet and they started it but they didn't finish it, and imagine now somebody else is born on the planet in the middle of their karmic cycle. Really what it is we do consider every human being has their own karma, but we are in the karma of all the human beings that have lived on this planet. We are hilariously in the karma of the universe. Similarly, let's say there's 4 people who go out drinking, right? And the designated driver drinks, or the designated driver doesn't drink. And when the driver is driving, if the driver isn't intoxicated, it's as if it's kind of like when somebody drives a car and there's other people in it, the other people's karma has come into the line of the driver's karma. And I'm trying to say that human beings are passengers of the cosmos, of the karma of the cosmos. this idea of a sense of loneliness that the future generations are experiencing or may experience, who knows? Who knows how technologically dependent the human experience is going to be in the future. But I would say the notion of human loneliness being an intellectual opportunity, I am pretty much saying that back in the day, we were part of our environment unconsciously. Now we have consciously separated from our environment. The decision to be a part of environment has come down to the choice of every human free will. It's another way of saying our ancestors wanted to reach an intellectual destination through the effort of building human civilization. And this intellectual effort has led man, the human psyche, on a path of not just self-analysis, but self-criticism. You see, human beings are on some level creatures, entities that are existing in two dimensions of how the world happens. There is an inner dimension, there is an outer dimension. Our inner life is who we are before we do anything, or who we are behind our eyes. Our outer life is what we do in front of our eyes. Now, there is a constant comparison of value. I want people to think of the idea of depression in the context of this episode as imagine an inventor. Imagine an inventor that behind his eyes, the inventor sees an invention he can create, but in front of his eyes he doesn't have the resources or the possibility of creating it. So it would be as if an inner dream is not being realized or awakened to in the outer life. I have thought about the psychology of creaturehood. I have thought about the significance of, a new set of behavioral ethics, connecting to emotion. I'm trying to pretty much say that the world was unconsciously just being an existential activity. Human beings attained consciousness. It became a subjective event as much as it was just a physical event. Now, the subjective event in our minds is living faster than it is living in our body, and the human consciousness, just to be a biological human being, to be a creature that is physical, it's as if there is a huge demand, or what I'm trying to say is that we are this physical entity, but we also have a non-physical mind. Within our non-physical life, the visions and expectations on reality can differ from what is happening in our outer life. A huge sign that human beings are multidimensional beings is just this observation that there's people with different biological status. So what I mean by this is that even though every person considers that they have a human body, but sometimes giving into the desires of the mind make us act as if we are not a human body. For example, somebody who's getting fat is someone who is not consciously in their body to some degree. They are inside. They're embodying their sense of self in their mind more than their sense of self physically. And this is important for the reasons a person finds, right? Right now, the era of intellect is a suggestion that human beings have to interact with reality to be convinced by it. What I think has happened is that our ancestors lived with levels of emotional freedom due to the absence of complex structural thought that needs to adjust behavior. As the intelligence of the species has increased, so has its capability of this intelligence to access doubt or truth. You see, reality is mysterious. We open our eyes in an event. Many human beings don't care about this event. Most human beings, the way they are living is that they are looking for room temperature comfort. But temperature comfort for ideology means pretty much people are looking to first survive, then they are looking to psychologically be liberated. That means it's like we're seeking an outer expansion before we're seeking an inner expansion, because we're under the idea that if our body stops existing, our mind may stop as well. But the important thing about human life, and the cool thing about human life, is that every person is like dropped. Imagine there's this airplane, hilariously, right, with 8 billion souls on it, and this suddenly all the souls are skydiving onto Earth. Imagine 8 billion beings with the poetry of different cosmic sectors, suddenly all have skydived into being a creature on the Earth. Just playfully I'm saying this, and the idea is suddenly realizing that we entered the Earth, we were not born on Earth. There's a huge difference psychologically. Mystically speaking, the mystic liberates itself from the idea of itself, so then the unknown navigates the moment. Pretty much the free will is in the driver's seat, or nature's will, or in a manner of speech, divine will is in the driver's seat. I have wondered about what the idea of trust is, and I'm becoming more convinced that trust is just the allowance to activate energy. The activation of energy is the result of trust. I feel that the way civilization is heading, due to Okay. Somebody in the chat section says, can you expand a bit on what you've just said about the sense of self? It's like, of course, man, every day. Every day I am attempting to expand on everything I'm saying. Yeah, I can say it. I'll just continue, and I feel the question will be answered. So what I'm trying to say is that I am looking at what the human being is. I am considering it primarily starting from 2 dimensions. So, if let's say, if you hypothetically, like an extraterrestrial landed right now, like just appeared on my balcony and was like, "Hey, podcaster named Mr.Within, what's the human being? What's going on with the human experience?" My explanation would be simply this: that we were an activity of force, an unconscious existential activity. That means there's an existential dimension where the world was happening before our consciousness even had a position to exist. Now, what consciousness means is that in the middle of this existential, unconsciously happening event, suddenly there came the conscious dimension of the experiencer. It wasn't just that the brain was happening, the brain noticed it was happening. What I'm trying to say pretty much is that think of it this way: that your mind is a different dimension than your body. So there is an experiential dimension to the human being, and there is an existential dimension. The existential dimension, we are experiencing the change of objects, such as our body, but in the experiential dimension, we're experiencing the change of subjects. Now, human beings are creatures that have primarily been preoccupied with their outer realms. The more we go back in history, the more we see human beings having a comfort to exist in the world, and a comfort to be an expression, an existing expression. And the more we have come forth in history to 2022, we are finding human beings not having the same comfort and existential freedom as their ancestors. It's kind of bizarre, but I feel deep down, every human being's been acknowledging this, is that pretty much the future generations lose something that the past generations had, but they are given something that the past generation could never have. What I'm trying to say is that because the speed of our inner experiential life, it's like our mind is a film, our body is a film. Because the film of the mind, due to the ability of consciousness to probabilize when it comes to the future, it's like our minds it's like we're experiencing being an actor in a faster occurring film behind our eyes than in front of our eyes. And I'm saying that the desire of our ancestors seemed to not be one of purity. Let me say it this way: there are jungles that we have to get out of. We got out of a physical jungle, and we entered, in some sense, a psychological jungle. And now I am giving this talk in the psychological jungle, where the jungle is made of language and ideology. And pretty much what is happening is that we were hunter-gatherers. That means, imagine we were hunting buffalo back in the day, but now human experience and the mystery of consciousness in its own world is hunting for worlds. We are hunting for the experience of new worlds. Whatever anybody says, their success involves the unknown potential of reality. This is why we're alive. If the past Oh my god, guys, I gotta apologize. This was on mute and I was just flying through the episode. Alright. I wish somebody can tell me like how long it was on mute. That would be very convenient. Okay, whatever, guys. I think it was on mute a couple minutes. But the idea is important. So the ideas, you see, what I'm trying to say is that something strange is happening. It's like the species, the human being, the human creature is becoming multidimensional to itself, so it's distrusting its ability in dimensions, in certain dimensions, right? What I'm trying to say is that it's like the mind of the species is activated and we are realizing we have access to a different speed of or different type of reality through imagination than compared to the actuality of reality. And by the way, if there's any questions, as many questions, ask away. For moments on this planet happen once and then the novelty turns again. So anybody could ask as many questions as they want. It'd be an interesting challenge for me too. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that I'm noticing something. I'm noticing that our species is disconnecting from an emotional faith in, and it's like we're this energy, and our ancestors, because they had less inner experiential freedom, there was less complex ideology on the planet. They were very simply just existing in the outer realms. I want everybody on the planet to imagine that what if there's a probability, right now it's 2022, what if there's a probability that the psyche of human beings in the future generations is acting in accordance to a fragility. It's kind of like if we had a ratio of, let's say, a human being living a lifetime, and we're like, okay, this person, 100% of their experiences in the lifetime were outer realm centered, right? But imagine we suddenly see an introverted human being who it's as if 50% of their life is in the outer realms and 50% of their life, imagine, is in their inner realms. That means, imagine there's this question at the end of the lifetime, where what percentage of the lifetime was the creature living as a mind in the moment, and what percentage was the person just being a body. What I'm trying to say are our ancestors, because the world was a simpler place, had less of a challenge. A huge amount of human suffering has to do with how smart we are. Our species is so intelligent that the more it knows, the bigger the problems of reality become. You know, Socrates was one of the first who caught on to this, even though the ancient mystics and yogis lived through it, you know. Socrates says the only true knowledge or wisdom is to know that you know nothing. Right, so I'm saying on some level when I give all these talks, I'm like, I don't know, I know nothing, but from nothing it's a starting point. Imagine there's a pessimist that looks at a empty glass of water and cries for how there's no water in the glass and how misfortunate the moment is. And now imagine the optimist looks at the glass and says, "Yo, who wants a glass of water?" Do you know? Like, as if the opportunities seem to be possible. What I'm noticing is that human attention, which is the attention of a biological entity, is experiencing other worlds. It's like our inner lives are happening at a faster speed than our outer lives. So our intelligence is doubting its simple expression in the outer realms. Human beings, what I was saying is, imagine in the future, let's give it 100, 200 years. I'm saying this is a probability. I live to see a different reality happen. But let's say that something happens on this planet that human beings, imagine universal income sets in. And imagine there's this huge philosophical realization of the abstract presence of the concept of money, and so this abstraction can be magnified. So it's as if, imagine in the future, everybody's getting a check from the government that's equivalent to a couple $1 million, like every day. Okay, I'm saying due to the abstract ability, even though I'm not saying, I'm not an economics professor here, there's angles that could counter this view economically, but what I'm saying is that imagine people didn't have a reason to work outside. And imagine there was a sort of isolation. That means not only civilization was becoming, giving less reasons for human beings to be physical creatures, but imagine corruption, dishonesty, and inefficiency really had taken the species to a tormented phase where human beings could not trust other human beings. To remain as a human being, there has to be at least another human being a human being can trust, right? Mystics who go into forests and they experience supreme solitude, they find the resolution of their emotions in accordance to an insight about the nature of mind. Mysticism is also another way of saying that it's a portal towards dehumanized truth. Somebody says how to not doubt our intelligence in the chat section. I would say an approach could be that you live in a world where the concept of doubt doesn't exist. When it comes to the meaning of reality, we can't ignore how the free will is making choices. The mind is an awareness to an infinite, let's say, array of archetypes. And so really what the power of the free will is to choose which archetypal piano key it hits. I'm trying to suggest a picture for the viewers that imagine in the future there comes reasons unknown, that there's a probability of our species distrusting the outer realms and living inner lives as minds. Not only would this reduce the population and have a, I would say, detrimental effect, because overpopulation is never a problem when in the future we can build sky cities and use three-dimensional space. But it's this idea that if the mind doesn't find a reason to be a human, it becomes an unconscious instinctual follower of anything that feeds it. It's like, imagine somebody who has been lonely for so long, right, that after so much of loneliness, their standards for reality kind of fall apart, become transparent. But let's say some there's a probability that human beings will be lonely in the future when it comes to the expressionism of their inner realms in their minds. I feel that's an intellectual opportunity, and the main essence of this episode is pretty much, if I was to say directly, when I was looking out the window of my car, what I realized that human beings are not just seeking to be something, whether successful or a failure or whatever. They are seeking involvement with the potential of their intelligence. Or I should say differently, they are seeking how their potential intelligence can be involved with the intelligence of reality. And I feel what's happening is that if on a cultural level the behavior of civilization is becoming impure, the psyche has to make a choice. Do I want to de-evolve or descend towards the savageness of an animal, which it took us 4.5 billion years to snap out of, and to become civilized, right? We will jump towards an intellectual realization. That means, think of it this way, that all human beings have an urge to interact with something unknown. Even though we're known creatures, known body, known mind, we wonder about what is the known body and known mind doing. And what it is doing is trying to have a relationship with where the unknown is. And really what I find the idea of true love to be is how the more than one moment can move the moment. The presence of unknown minds, the presence of an intelligence in the room. Human beings, if they reach a level of, let's say, nihilistic okay, let me see the glass half full. I'm pretty much seeing that if the species disconnects from its relationship with itself, that means if human beings, rather than feeling more honored by being a member of a species, they feel dishonored, they're going to disengage. When reality is disengaged from the attention, something tends to happen to the moment, how would I say it? I'm saying that the understanding that the human being was seeking from another human being, if cyberspace takes over, or if there's some sort of, dehumanized agenda going on, that there's a danger of inner human extinction on the planet. The inner extinction, right? It would be a way of, as if something is challenging how the human being is being a human being, but on a psychological level. But what is challenging it is the structure of the system. So really what I'm saying is that when a human, imagine there's this just deep pattern, this deep urge to want to understand the unknown. And right now, the most advanced way of understanding the unknown is through other people, right? People are alive. If you go towards mysticism, then that's a dehumanized, a domain of experience, There's really 4 domains of our experience. Our species has tapped into 3. 1 remains for the future to tap into future generations. There's a way of being a psychological entity that I think may not be tapped into. Give it like 1,000 years or something. It would be a way where it would be a sort of kind of like, the closest thing I could say to it would be immortal psychology. It would be as if, imagine there's a therapist in the future that is interviewing like an immortal being, Anyways, what I'm trying to say is, if the human being has a relationship with the unknown of the human, another human being, that means it's like if human interaction is what's keeping us human, right? If the human interaction is taken out of the equation, the human being is left alone, but the human being realizes that part of being a human being is the abstract component of it, right? So it's another way of saying, I'm saying the love and understanding that if human beings can't get this from other human beings, they are left with a sort of reversion of their psyche towards an intellectual understanding. That means it's like if let's say person A and person B are interacting and they're human intelligence, both of them are human beings. It's another way of saying excuse me, to continue. Oh my God. What I'm trying to say is, if we have one human being, person A, and another human being, person B, and they are inside an interaction, okay? So it's as if one unknown mind, one unknown inner realm is interacting. What's fascinating for it is another unknown realm, another unknown mind. Now, what I'm trying to say is, imagine if like the Castaway movie, that guy from Castaway was like, from the Castaway movie, he found himself alone on an island. He had to confront his human loneliness. And he survived, and at some point when he was about to go insane because there was no human interaction, what he did was that he turned an object into a person. He still perceived personality in the moment, even though there were no people on that island, but that volleyball had become a person. Right? So I'm trying to tell people the relationship of our minds. When we are not around human beings, we're still in a human world. So the mind still has access to personification into the object. But now what I'm saying is that, sure, that guy from Castaway could have on some level turned a volleyball into a person. Like, that's one strategy. But another strategy would be that the person realizes that there is an unknown beauty, and I feel like this, what I'm telling people, I'm telling people something that I think saved me in this life. It saved the state of my mind, you know. But it's just this view that you realize the mystery behind, let's say, a soul in a body that moves in the moment, right? An unknown soul in an unknown body, and the mystery of what concepts point to. I don't know why, but I have this deep view that if a person cannot find something to love, they stop being human. They become desensitized, you know. And so if there's a paradigm in the future where human beings are distrusting their outer realms, right? It was as if shyness was a symptom of something way more dangerous happening in the psychology of the human species, you know. It's like it's not just nuclear bombs that we got to worry about in the outer realms destroying the human species. It is how 8 billion human points of human intelligence pilot themselves towards the future. I'm trying to say is that instead of a volleyball, instead of an object being personified, a subject can also be personified. And so a person can wonder about the unknown dimensions not behind another human being, but they can also wonder about the unknown dimensions behind concepts. So I'm saying that if the human species distrusts its outer realms, its emotions are being based on its inner realms of every human being. Sorry guys, I just noticed there's these spam messages in the chat section. So people should be cautious of that. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is that if the human psychology finds itself in an existential loneliness, not all of reality is physical. And there's a way that the world is happening where our minds are the privilege to be the front seat of. We are not just ourselves, but we are our own greatest observer. And really what spirituality is wondering about what is looking through your eyes. The most brilliant poetry. There will come a time where the human psyche, in states of loneliness, think of it as an equation of somebody being in a crowded room and somebody suddenly going outside the crowded room. That means reality is not influenced by other unknown minds, and you're kind of left with your own mind. You know, this is going to sound like a hilarious metaphor, but a shy person is like somebody who hasn't trusted to step out of the cave. So in the limitations of the inner realms, the person is functioning in their outer realms. You know. You know, the only way we can have a peaceful world, if the vision of a peaceful world is more cooler than the evil one. You know, they're like, how does good win over evil? It's like, what problem does goodness solve? And what problem does evil solve? Divine questions the sacredness of empty space. You know, a part of me, sometimes when I give these talks, I think of it this way, that I'm a person who has convinced my own ego that its greatest victory is the victory of the species. And so I wonder about the future of the species, just like a person can wonder about what they're going to do tomorrow. We can wonder about the tomorrows of our species, right? And the issue is that people are trying to either, I think truth is based on the past, truth is based on the present, but I am telling you, truth is actually how we become conscious that we are being the future. It's another way of saying, you know, man, let's say, let me say it this way. I'm going to go into a theological commentary here. Just share my opinion here. You know, it's kind of like I think about what is the most advanced state, that state of being that every human mind deserves. That means imagine every human being, regardless of being good and evil, is just being a simple moment where the DNA is expressing, you know. There is a hilarious realization that complex moments complex occurrences are held in simple moments. The ability of man's mind is not to just identify reality with movement and noise, but in some sense to realize that in the stillness and silence, we access the presence of the universe within us. And then what I mean by this is that for a moment you stop being an idea, and it's like the video game of the personality, and the archetypal psychology is just put on pause, and for a moment one is in the reverence of being in an unknown world, you know. And the idea of God, what the reason it is the concept of it has a majesty of its own, because the idea of God is that when the creature realized how lonely it is, what was there with it? You see, it's a sort of hidden urge of the species to seek companionship, to survive. But what is the companionship of the mind? It is the mind that discovers the universe as its home. You know, to me, the idea of God is one of the most profound ways that human beings have retaliated to emptiness. It's as if, imagine God created like the human being. Just to entertain a theological perspective, there's something I want to say about this. So let's say God creates this human being, and the human being doesn't listen to God, and in some sense its desires cause it to make a mistake, and God is like, what is this? I made this, human being, and this human being is not listening to me. It's like an artist, and like tries to use it, paints it, makes a brush stroke on an empty canvas, and the brush stroke happens differently. So in some sense it's this idea of God creating something with its miniature capability, and then wondering about the behavior of its creation. Just like an inventor, imagine there's going to be in the future inventors that make androids and, I don't know, program it with some sort of, irrational number-based AI programming or something to simulate at least a behavior of the soul into the machine. But it would be as if just like a human being building an android and then turning on the android and in some sense being like, how does this android behave to someone who created it? For me, it was kind of like God created something and then it wondered about its behavior. And what the concept of the fallen angel represents in theology is the concept of God's doubt, because the idea of an angel is a being that cannot listen to anything aside from the divine will. It's kind of like God was the puppet behind the archetype of the fallen angel. God was the hand behind that archetype, but it's not, it doesn't have anything to do with the ideology, right? So I'm saying that there's one thing to truly look at the geometry of a concept, and then there's another thing where we choose to emotionally extract meaning out of ideology, right? The more something is emotional, the more it's considerable that there's specific behavior involved in how the emotions arise. Now, God, imagine angelically doubting itself. begins to test its creation. The person who invented an android in the future was like, okay, android, go into the world and try to be a human, right? Try to be the best thing you can be, right? And so imagine this android goes, and this android becomes lost in the world. And the android doesn't know how to get back, and it has, like, let's say, the simplicity of like a lost puppy or something, so what I'm so what I'm trying to say is that the inventor is watching its creation's psychology without itself being there. So when the human being finds itself alone in the cosmos, it's like the android being like walking in the world and feeling lost and being like, why doesn't life have a meaning? And realizing that its meaning isn't found until the person finds the inventor. So it's like the lost android finds its inventor. For me, it's as if, I think it's kind of emotional and poetic, but God wants to see if its creation loves it. The inventor wants to see if the android can acknowledge the inventor. This is the power of honesty, decency, compassion, benevolence, and purity, guys. These are virtues of a psychological nature that should not be lost, because they are the pillars of civilization. That means there's some psychological states that are so being accepted as the essence of tradition. It's kind of like, if we're really advanced beings, we're trying to be like, okay, if we're really advanced, we should probably be able to benevolently and efficiently and ingeniously kind of solve the problems of humanity. Do you know what I'm saying? There's something here that it's as if the species doesn't need to clone itself and be in just one ideological system and think that everybody acting like somebody who lived 1,000,000 years ago is truth. That's in some sense being ignorant to God. Do you know? It's as if to think that man needs something else other than what it is another way of saying man is doubting God's great creation. So it's like a religious person being asked, you doubt yourself, and the person's like, I can't doubt God's creation, come on. What I'm trying to say, dear viewers, is that the body is in one dimension, physical dimension. The mind is an experience of a multidimensionalism. This multidimensionalism doesn't just have to do with all the geometry. I would say, okay, I'll say it this way: it's like shape, substance, color, space. All of these. It's like our eyes give us access to, the treasure that is the world. I thought about what is the solution to 8 billion creatures suffering on a planet. What can we do about that? As a sort of global problem where everybody imagines wondering how to solve this. And you know what it is? It's as if we are waiting for our species to get tired of not being advanced. You know, the concept of God is the suggestion that that space is intelligent. To be a human being is to be like this rare artwork or this rare masterpiece of nature that is arose. You know, it's like to be a human being is like to be in a world where we are one of the superior dimensions. Now, the consciousness of humanity, that means imagine in an advanced civilization, it's like there were more efficient decisions were being made than inefficient. So imagine like a really good looking advanced civilization would be an advanced civilization where the inefficiency ratio to efficiency, it's like 70% efficient occurrence, 30% inefficient. And the definition of efficiency is not biased ideological agenda, you know, agendas. It's in some sense what I'm trying to say is that the potential of the human being is surpassing the dualistic judgment on the human being. Just like God wants to see its creation, can notice it, or even love it. You know, to love God is to love the inconceivable unknown. You know, people don't realize even when religious, let's say religious people say, I worship God. God is not, at least in the monotheistic tradition, God is not an object. And it's not even a subject. It's beyond the subject. It's the creator of all possibility. You know? If somebody says, Mr.Within, what's your, you know, conclusion on metaphysics? What is the furthest your eyes have gone? I would say in the outer realms, it's limited to all the moments in existence I've journeyed through. In the inner realms, it's all the moments that all the different contexts to reality I have discovered. I think it would be incredible to not just have the idea of success exists, but to make it an experiential reality. You know what it is? It's like we're cavalry. The human species, we thought we were sheep, but we're actually cavalry, and we're 8 billion, you know, human beings riding the waves of the natural realm. All human beings have one common denominator, you know. If somebody says, if I say, like, I know everybody on this planet, and somebody says, Mr.Within, explain your argument, I would be like, if what knowing someone means to see what they see, every person is noticing the unknown, or will come to realize that there is unknown ways that intelligence is being. There is instantaneous mysteries that time, the concept of time, cannot resolve. The sooner we realize we are 8 billion explorers on a rock in the middle of nowhere, we will experience a new humanity. You know? Really what it is sometimes I feel in an intellectual driven destiny of the human species, the future generations right now. Imagine all the unborn people in the future who will be born. Imagine they're all watching us. You know, the unborn is watching, the future unborn. Now, if we were like, okay, how is the future judging us? It would be as if how much we cared for the future. I am trying to make the argument that, okay, every human being's knowledge is in an unknown world, is in an unknown space, atmosphere, and context. It's in an unknown context, the known concept of self. So if we as a species realize the edge of our knowledge is the unknown, and if the species suddenly shift its attention to be like, okay, to be a human being is not to just wonder about how knowledge can be accepted, but in some sense what knowledge really is. I'm trying to say pretty much that the unknown is the common denominator to all types of human knowledge. When a scholar of the known observable universe realizes that there's unobservable dimensions, what unobservable dimensions suggest is that there's new information that can change our view of the world. Pretty much we have a snapshot photograph of what humanity has to be, and then we have a dynamic system where multiple dimensions are working at the same time. You see, our ancestors, they were in physical battlefields, but now the species is on a psychological linguistic battlefield, and so wars are starting when human minds are disagreeing, and the species has to be like, okay, how smart do we want to be in our own story of reality, with what level of advancement of consideration, right? Like, imagine which is better, a world of incompetent evil people, or a world where people are so competent they don't need to be evil. Deep down within me, there's this calming. I feel like if I was a magnet, I feel like I'm being pulled, and I feel I'm being pulled by this idea of what the actual greatness of the species can potentially look like. Imagine somebody so in love with the future that they have forgiven the past and present instant. That's the power of the idea of an advanced civilization, the idea of an advanced future, the idea that we're 8 billion explorers in an unknown world, and we are carrying the flag of conscious activity. Really an advanced humanity will resolve fear by accelerated understanding. Our species is getting ready to step out of the cocoon of language. And so a generation of completely new human behaviors. That means if psychology to some degree was the dependency, pretty much it's like how the environment behaved in a conditioned the psychology of the child, let's say. But now imagine an internal linguistic, abstract, or cyber or technological replacement, right? That means it's like before nature was moving the imagination, now something else is moving the imagination. It's kind of like the spirit of the logos changed. The cosmos had a natural intent, then it came towards an unnatural one. You see, it's like the magnificence of humanity is the potential of the planet. That means the greatness of humanity is the greatest value of the planet. I think about 8 billion. Imagine whoever you are listening to me. Imagine me and you and everybody who's listening. We are like commanding officers in a battlefield. Imagine medieval ancient battlefield. Or we're like generals and we're watching a battlefield, right? We're watching a battle unfold, and the generals, their battle is based on their own strategy. Right, so we're 8 billion generals watching, about to see how a battle will happen, right? Or let's say whoever's just listening to this talk right now, to make it kind of humorously poetic. I want to see victory, but I want to see the collective victory. And because I want to see it, it's another way of saying, why is the unknown here? Why is there a potential? What were our ancestors secretly living for? What greatness did every generation of human beings that lived on the planet kind of, like, what kind of torch did they pass down? For me, it's become this sort of puzzle of a lifetime, to see what is the fastest way we can convert inefficient ignorance into efficient clarity, you know. It's like, what kind of tea should people be drinking? Clarity, for the love of God, clarity, you know. I don't know, it's kind of like something about the human species that until it doesn't get to see its greatest expression, it doesn't feel satisfied. And the mind is an abstract domain, so what it means is that it's like the value of life is not just by your furthest outer vision, but your furthest inner vision. Your furthest inner vision being an implication of the context that the world is happening for you. You know, I predict, humorously, that in the future there will be somebody like Mother Teresa, and there will be a Mother Teresa to, let's say, disowned, dehumanized clones and androids, because really the value of consciousness is the permission to be active in a world. As long as there's a permission for activity and authorization of conscious activity, there is life. I'm realizing that the species is headed towards a situation where it cannot forever keep the fragility of its comfort zone, of its normality. It's like the species is enchanted by language, and that's causing the species to limit what the world actually is to fragments and stories. In reality, truth is the journey of everything. I want to see that the species, in any moment it finds itself, any moment, that means any person who, let's say, finds themselves walking in the desert of anguish, okay, or the desolate wastelands of the desolate wastelands of let's say, lost selfhood. Experiences can cause us to forget the value of how our eyes are even being opened. There's so many ways that language is possessing the species. When I saw the movie Joker, I realized one of the most fascinating things, right? that whether the person is good or evil, they need an ideology to make sense of the good and evil. Right? We are creatures that our brains are simulating stories, so our biological existence in space has meaning. The brain has found the brain is a way of converting an empty world into meaning. I don't know how to say it, but it's kind of like, because we are alive, the cosmos is not enough. Because there is vision, consciousness is not enough. There's many ways that the world happens, and at the end of it, we will discover what was in our control and what wasn't. Imagine the human being, before being judged by God, asks God a question. And asks this question, God, why was judgment necessary? Why did anything have to happen at all? Why couldn't the mistake be forgiven in heaven? If all mistakes on earth can be forgiven by God, why wasn't the mistake of Adam in heaven forgiven by God? Because that mistake was necessary for an awareness of what the human being could be. The concept of, this is really my view, the concept of evil or the fallen angel and all of this, to me, is just the idea of duality. To me, I noticed that in religion, the idea, Abrahamic, biblical idea, points to this view that it's like the fallen angel is controlling this dimension, right? Right, as if God has allowed, evil to behave, to control behavior. Now, it's as if it's the scenario where, how would I say it? Just like the idea of the archetype of evil, an evil moderator to reality, there can also be this realization that language is kept in a dualistic context, which is another way of saying duality is that moderator's room. And it's another way of, how would I say this? I'm trying to say the archetype of the devil points to the archetype of duality. Duality is doubt. Doubt is separation from a singular unity. And I find that the idea is it's this idea that God created everything, and if God created everything, God created good and evil. Okay? And so God created the absence of potential, and God created the ability for potential. Human beings building an advanced civilization, for any person who's religious hearing this, is equivalent to see how great was God's creation truly. You see, there's many forces, there's many ways man's mind can personify, the ultimate archetype of reality. It's kind of this idea that 8 billion human beings are looking at an unknown world, and their conscious psychological reaction to the world needs to be concluded in an ideological context, right? It's as if something happening and the person being like, what just happened, right? So it's like the mind is trying to trying to pinpoint an experience inside an ideological context. It's as if there's an inner world and there's an outer world, and when the moment is turbulent, it's something is shaky, like the inner realm tries to verify the outer tries to verify the inner. What I'm trying to say is that rather than the human species emotionally becoming violent because having this feeling that the world doesn't see it, like the Joker movie. I want to see what the most advanced humanity would look like, and that vision is the ultimate emotion. It's as if they said to go big or go home, and it's kind of like the person's like, okay, my biological existence is a certain limited life cycle, and then at the same time, what is the value of this energy that I am being? A human being's building an advanced civilization. It's like all the bees realize they can build a beehive, right? And the queen of the beehive for the human, let's say, advanced civilization would be the idea of the future generations. That means if somebody says, who runs an advanced civilization, who leads an advanced civilization, the answer is always the future generations. When the future became sacred, advanced civilizations were discovered. It's very, I take it from a mystical angle that it's like, what ultimate story is holding reality? And because I've realized that the language is being observed, there's an unknown experiential observer that is not an ideology, but ideas come and go to it. That unknown experiencer, I have come to realize, is not language, and rather the secrets of its truth are more how it's instantaneously being, rather than it needs to do something in time to verify itself. It's very strange. There is a world here, and destiny seems to be what we do with it. Every person has access to multiple realities. There's this saying that they say people are two-faced. I'll tell you this, people are as infinite-faced as their brain simulates their sense of self. We are tunneling through the alignment of inner abstract events with outer physical events, and that's really what the mind is. The mind has an ability not to personify something, but the mind has also the ability to, I'll say it this way, it's kind of like Tom Hanks in that Castaway movie was talking to that volume, right? That means the mind had put a spirit into that object, and the character, what was it, Tom Hanks? That moment where he was shouting Wilson, Wilson, like a genius moment in cinematic history. One of the most incredible scenes in cinematic history. I wonder that every human being will inevitably engage the unknown. And it's kind of like, what did we do with our knowledge while it was there? It's remarkable. Mysticism is realizing that you're an unknown user of a known life. That there's ways that my intelligence is present that has nothing to do with language and symbolism. The mystery of our own mind. Imagine, people looking outwardly for truth and then realizing their consciousness is being in a realm. We are here experiencing worldhood, and the more advanced we experience it, the more common sense it is to realize that new dimensions are found where the past is confronted. In my science fiction, I've created this world set in the year 5025, and the government is called the Enlightened Society. And the way the Enlightened Society revolutionized efficiency and peacefulness on the planet was that it treated every concept and language as art. So there was no good or bad art. Each artwork stood in its own universe, right? Right, that means it's as if religion is being preached because people are being like it's not being acknowledged. Right, but imagine if there was this global realization that every ideological system is like unique architecture. It's like a unique artwork. We're living in paintings, some of them drawn by our free will, and a lot of it drawn by how the world is happening. We're looking for an advanced civilization would be like pretty much the way I've envisioned it. It's like an airplane metaphor. So it's as if there's going to be cabin crew, the advanced communicators, and then there's going to be the pilots of consciousness. But anyways, this is all for a different talk. So, somebody experiences human loneliness, realizes on some level, what does that mean? That means the mind has to rely on a different sort of intelligent behavior, right? Imagine in the future, human beings are just like social in cyberspace. People don't even want it. It's like communication is becoming so psychologically in cyberspace instant that there's no need for travel. I'm pretty much having this view that if I was on an island, like castaway on an island, like Tom Hanks, even though our species is castaway on a galactic island, imagine empty space being unknown waters. And the Earth is the island that we're trying to use everything to survive, The greatness of our species is in its ability to extract efficiency from all dimensions. To be a human being is to have access to a very unique paintbrush, and then your free will and personality is how you're painting the moment in accordance to how your attention is animating in the moment. Like that's like to be alive is the most spiritual experience, It's like the person, imagine they ask someone, hey, do you have spiritual experiences? The person says, I thought consciousness in the void of empty space is pretty spiritual. So it's like every day, man. Every day I'm like, how is the unknown interacting with knowledge? What is the true evolution of the human species? I'm like, okay, imagine some intense events may happen in human history. We don't know. We don't know, like, if the futures are going to go into modes of suffering, or they're going to go towards, it's like, I'm trying to build paradise on Earth, because I'm like, why not? Why does the idea exist then? So it's as if, in some sense, it's kind of like we have an opportunity to see the inefficiency of our species, which is so, like, lame. Or we can choose to see the efficiency of the species, right? So the efficiency of the species is pretty much how 8 billion pilots of their inner realms, every person's free will is moving their mind, right? So it's about the interaction and the ability to see dimensions to reality. Anytime we refuse to see dimensions in reality, but somehow we feel we know there's more dimensions, fear arises, right? And it's not natural to say that a human being should be fearless 24/7. It's like, what are we, robots? Like, you know, it's like, for me, all I have realized is that the mind is here. And the concept of anything in life is how the mind is happening. We are a very, like, it's miracle level, guys, how we exist. You know, somebody was saying something that was kind of like startling me. Somebody was saying that the earth is literally at a place where if it was closer, you know, it's like it wouldn't become inhabitable because of the sun, and if it was further away, it would be frozen, you know. We are like randomities, you know, divine coincidence, you know. We're like an evolutionary creature who opened its eyes and realized it's like the planet is literally orbiting a sun, you know. Reality is so bizarre because on some level it has a geometrical value, you know. In some of these talks I've said there's those people, it's like, what kind of people are going to save the world in the future? And I'm going to say it's like it's going to be designers. The consciousness to design means we have to find a greater space to design something new. We want to see how advanced our species was before it dehumanized, or, you know, inner extinction would be dehumanization, outer extinction would be like physically we're not here anymore. But right now we're here, and we're like, what do we do with this unknown world, you know? Imagine somebody, you know, adopts a pet, right, and like a puppy, and they're like, what am I going to do with this puppy, you know? And then at the same time somebody being like, oh man, what am I going to do with this unknown world, you know? It's as if to be conscious in the world is to adopt sensory perception for reality. It's kind of like there's so many parallels, so because life basically is geometrical, and all geometry has the void in common. So it's kind of like the more we look at the idea of God, the more space is holding everything and watching itself, and then the more we think of the idea of man, the more there is a sort of mechanism at work, right? Because to be a psychological entity is to also be a biochemical mechanism, right? Something has reached some sort of stability level where the mind can move, right? You know, it's like, little do we know what our ancestors were indirectly living for the greatness of the mind of the future generation. It's as if a person wonders what level of greatness does the future generations deserve, and the answer is inconceivable, limitless. It's as if, you know, imagine, you know, that generation who gifted the future generations infinity, right? Because the nature of man has to use the space. Man's mind requires activity. Activity on some level means where's the motivation of an animation of the soul being, right? Imagine suddenly this giant robot moves and it is fighting like an giant extraterrestrial in like a movie or something, right? There's this show called Evangelion, which blew my mind, you know. You know, I was just living as this simple, you know, foolish Persian guy, and suddenly I saw Evangelion, and I was like, okay, what is the content? How deep, you know, can every moment of reality have a meaning? So it's like wondering what is moving. A giant robot, there's a driver, okay? And to any moment, the soul is the concept of the unknown driver of the free will. know what it is? It's really how far the species can envision its greatness and how far it can choose to be responsible for that greatness. The species has used immortality as an excuse to not wonder about immortality. You know, what I mean by immortality is like the depth of the journey of meaning. What consciousness is that attention has found itself active in a world. And the initial value system upon reality is starting from one's center. That means our minds are painting the value, or animating the value and meaning into what we see physically in front of us, you know. Really what education is the access to geometrical patterns that anytime you see something, you begin to see it through more than one dimension, right? The mind is there's an incredible hidden purpose to why we are conscious as creatures, right? There's something going on this planet that is beyond the idea of the planet. And really what it is how the universal presence is really being realized by a microcosmic being to be accessed anytime. So what I'm trying to say is, like, man thinks he's separate from God, but when he stays true to himself, he realizes faith is kind of like the human archetype accessing the divine will. That's really what it is. It's trusting in reality. But to me, we don't need ideological worship. We need an appreciation of the greatness of whatever the human being is. I think the idea of advancement, guys, is a concept that literally you put it in front of anything, there you suddenly see the future of something. The idea, like the word advancement, is a sacred word. I'll say it. Like there's such a profoundness behind what the potential of a species could look like. Because what do, right? Like we see it. Let me say something incredible here. There's this narrative. Pretty much in this Japanese show, there's this universe built, this abstract universe, this work of fiction where the world, every person on the planet has some sort of ability and quirk, and in some sense they're all, everybody, it's like all the children in the educational system are being educated to become heroes that protect the world, right? It was like that sort of universe. And in it there was this concept of, as if the archetype of the hero being the preserver of the collective victory, you know. It's in the nature of just the creature that we are to care for what it is, you know, for what has arose from it, you know. I feel that the future generations, I'm writing a book on this, but I feel that the future generations are going to experience, and like their consciousness may forget what it means to be a creature in a natural environment. Because so much unnatural technology is replacing the direct need for the natural existence. I'm thinking that, okay, whatever happens in the future for the human species, whatever, you know, the children of the planet are destined for, whatever being you are in whatever dimension where your consciousness is present, if you do not wonder about the ultimate during the lifetime, it's as if you have forgotten why you're here. We are here to see the greatness of the world. I had to convince myself in some sense being like, what does evolution mean? You know, this creature was unconsciously experiencing life and it evolved 4.5 billion years to, in some sense, it evolved 4.5 billion years to just be able to notice its suffering. Like, WTF evolution, you know? It's like, what's the point of being conscious? And then I realized to be conscious of the suffering is another way of accessing the opposite geometry. It's as if the world is giving us inefficiency, so we just realize the opposite is efficiency. So guys, my attention has come to the chat section, and to honor the spontaneous messages in the moment, somebody says in the chat section how God creates itself. God is an uncreated idea. It's not something where the concept of creation applies. The concept of creation applies to man. Man is created. God is the creator. Right? That means God is the first domino. There's no other domino even before it. In the chat section, somebody says the more I look around, the more I realize that there's nothing there beyond the material and all the ways we describe or label the material. Just beyond that certain threshold, continue. There's nothing there. Is nothing there at all? Well, at least nothing we can manipulate or describe with our minds. Okay. So, this comment in the chat section, you are someone who's noticed the unknown. You have noticed that you've noticed the space where let's say the simulation of reality is happening in. Now this is where honesty is important, where the person has to be honest. Okay, whatever personality, whatever egoic construct, what is the value of what I'm experiencing? Right? And if you realize it's the void, that's another way of saying your brain has found a way to not be anything. So it's like it's like an access to a unique state of mind. Now, what I'm saying in this my own system of thought, I call it ring of the absent heaven. I'm saying there's three other dimensions. You can look at this world and have it appear as if there's no value to it. You can look at it as if everything is being the value at the same time. You can look at it as if the value is divided between an endless loop of chaos and order, or you could be like the value is infinite. So think of it this way: you have access to room where your attention is noticing how it doesn't have to be dependent on a subject, because that's what emptiness means. Right? So you're somebody you've noticed yourself beyond the language threshold. Now the idea of this is how you choose to experience your own unknown. Right? And this is something where you can't really have anybody outside of you tell you how something you're only seeing like can have a value. Right? All I could say is that honor the moment, and the moment karmically honorably happens. That means honor emptiness. As if the Zen monk that goes to the temple and he bows before entering the temple, the Zen monk is like, okay, the Buddha said in some sense the nature of objective phenomena is empty. Our minds are like these candles that, emanate light into an object and give it meaning, right? So it's like the nature of an object is the nature of our mind, right? This is why the Buddha went towards like a view of enlightenment being self-realization, because there's something here that regardless of how the outer happens, it seems to be internally coordinated, right? And what is our internal coordination? It's pretty much how we can close our eyes and access sight, which is a suggestion that there's a invisible cinema where imagination is happening. So for me, I'm like, okay, 8 billion creatures just woke up on a planet in the middle of nowhere. Each human being has to go discover the value of their inner realms, and then at some point look at the outer realms and be like, okay, how do I care for the world I'm looking at? right? And then your life begins gaining momentum when there is a victory, when the attention has set itself on a victory, right? Right now, the greatest victory would be to create a system where everybody's already victorious. Do you know? That means the psychological games of good and evil stopped because human beings realized they're not their thoughts. You know? Can you imagine? It's like, how did all wars stop? You know? A podcaster said you're not your thoughts, and all world leaders, went into samadhi. Really what it is like, we should treat the planet and advanced civilization is going to be like an advanced tourist agency. We're like, okay, we're all travelers in the space-time continuum as consciousness, and to discover the nature of our consciousness is another way of saying trying to discover our own life force. How does our own attention move? That means it's like, to be an advanced communicator is somebody who can pilot their inner realms and pilot their outer realms. Right now, the more people distrust the outer realms, the more comfortable, and it's going to be an excuse for them to move in the inner realms, right? That means I'm pretty much saying technology in the future can give human beings a reason not to be human. Okay, but before that, our humanity can be preserved in just stabilizing in the human idea and being like, okay, I'm a human being in an unknown world. Now, how does the world's discovered? How does consciousness journey through the unconscious, and that coming back is a sort of efficient feedback, right? That means it's as if it's like wondering about the dimensions of your intelligence. If you are a body in a world, then your reality is limited to an embodied dimension. But when we can sit down, close our eyes, and remember what food we ate yesterday and just see the image in our minds, it's as if there's no light entering our eyes, but we can still see. This is a power of consciousness. This is the sort of hidden divinity of the moment. What I'm trying to say is, people are going to be like, Mr. Within, it's like, how many times are you going to try? Honestly, I've reached a point where I'm just treating like everything that happens in my moment as a training of how the future will meet me. For me, I see a dimension to my life that is my physical life. I see a dimension to my life that is my invisible life. I see a dimension to my being right now that is inconceivable. My emotions are limited to my invisible life, which is how subjects and language has become a categorical, has become a simulation inside a natural world. You know what it is? It's kind of realizing the future generations deserve such an advanced world that for us to not be advanced, it would be as if, why did we not even try to see what it would look like, right? Imagine instead of Olympics, which is just physical sports that nations all over the planet compete in, we have in some sense a sort of, let's say, a sort of, intellectual Olympics, right? Where every nation, right, is just, it's like the whole educational systems on the planet, just all teachers look at the students and be like, all right, kids, where everybody's in an unknown world, and our intelligence is how we get to know this world, the nature of it. Our choices have a value, whether we see the value in it or not. And let me say something to the viewers about emptiness. This is something I found philosophically fascinating about emptiness. That how can we know that there is emptiness? If there is someone knowing there is emptiness, it's not empty. That means if mankind looks in front of his eyes and finds nothing, he realizes he is being the value in the moment. To discover the glow of your own conscious mind, You know, what it is like the person has to realize, okay, I'm as an energetic intent with my free will moving my body. Now, when I close my eyes and my body is still in silent, I begin to notice how my mind moves. How my mind moves is that it moves as a cinematic experience and then linguistic experience. There's an internal linguistic translation. So it's kind of like when I'm giving these talks, I'm seeing like an inner film, but I'm also seeing the inner film convert to language. And I'm also noticing that it's like the evolution of complexity into a realization of a universal simplicity. Right now, if I identify as a universal being, I'm a being beyond the concept of freedom. You know, it's really easy to dehumanize, right? But the idea is how efficiently could the human activity take place. You know, imagine all, children of the future generations, after they're done their homework, right? They're all trying to wonder about how to build an advanced civilization. Because what an advanced civilization means is that the species is staying true to all the dimensions it can acknowledge. So the idea of an advanced civilization is a world that, because it wants to advance, it doesn't have time to linger in suffering. The future redeems the past because the present can do something still. We are a sort of energy. It's not just about our psychology, it's about how the psychology arises. There was a time when I was younger, I would look at like Tai Chi masters and like Qigong masters, and I'd read like, okay, this is kind of like, some next level acting, right? But then I realized it's a perfect argument to consider that this whole time, regardless of our identity, our psychology, we have been an energetic being. We are energetically present, instantaneously existing. That's an ability of our being. That's the power of consciousness. It is where worlds can move. That is the magic. That is the beauty in the idea of consciousness. We are not just moving in a world. Our minds move worlds. That's the power of humanity. Our lifetime is like the discovery of a lifetime. It's kind of like somebody wondering about what's the meaning of life for an explorer. An explorer would be like as if the past is known, the future is left to be. We have to build a civilization where the members of civilization understand it's an efficient idea to live for the greatness of the whole civilization. Right now, anytime when we look at a civilization, let's say in a parallel universe, or imagine somewhere in the cosmos, a species like Earth is happening. A species, same time as our species was born, imagine on a planet somewhere else. And it went through something similar. It would be as if consciousness is in the classroom of evolutionary capability to acknowledged reality. You see, its behavior has to do with something that still has to be done, right? People, like a person's purpose is like how their intelligence moves. I'm just saying that imagine every person was successful, then if everybody was successful, the only thing would be left was to create a sort of collective system of success. Right? I'm saying like when a person becomes a champion of their inner realm, then you realize you're a servant of the outer realm. That means greatness is lives for greatness. It's kind of strange, but it's like the greatness of the past is the potential of the greatness of the present, and the greatness of the present is the potential of the greatness of the future. It's hilarious. Right now we're being the potential of the greatness of the future. You know, the future generations are like, all right, ancestors, how are you going to make your chess moves? You know, how's consciousness going to behave? Something they don't teach children, but I was like, no way if the educational system gets reformed. It's like systems theory has to be taught to children. Everybody, you know. To realize that we are the presence of multiple systems working simultaneously. What a human being is its ability to be human in the environment. Right, so somebody in the chat section says an interesting comment. They say they or we cannot build an advanced civilization as long as they or we keep putting our own individual needs or individuality above the very next person besides. So exactly, right? So the ego is like, why should I bother building an advanced civilization? I'll just live in my own successful bubble, right? Or the person just realizes that what does the ego, what does the selfish archetype in the moment want that is not caring for the advanced civilization? The selfish archetype wants victory, right? It's like the person's like, I don't have time to build an advanced civilization. I'm just going to be victorious in my alone, right? That person's like, but let me tell you something hilarious, right? It's as if that person attained, imagine the very next day, the victory they wanted. I'm saying the greatest individual victory is a collective victory. This whole time, it's like the greatest individual cannot be known until there is the greatest world. The most advanced being on the planet cannot be known until the most advanced context is found. Right? I'm saying, why has our species not noticed that what is granted with consciousness is a sort of recognition that there is geometry moving, and if we can envision forth the geometry of sight, it becomes a sort of relationship where imagination is kind of like a being using abstraction and reality to wonder about beyond itself. You know, we're not just a creature of thought. People are being treated like thoughts. It's like, what's the difference of seeing someone as a thought and seeing somebody as a barcode? Right now, it's sort of every person has a barcode in regards to how much they're being a physiological being and a psychological being. You know, I'm just saying that the species is in a phase of language worship because it is frightening to acknowledge that it's an unknown place. It's not just unknown based on the limitations of our knowledge. It's unknown beyond our knowledge. It's too big. The cosmos is, sometimes I feel it's like the planet was made for human beings, but not the galaxy, you know? Not the cosmos, right? Like the cosmos is made for a bigger entity, right? It's like I thought about, why should there be so many random shapes in space, and why should these random shapes in space move and have or self-organization capability? And then it's kind of realizing space is not space, emptiness is not emptiness. It's another way of saying emptiness for a conscious creature that cannot exist, because how can it be conscious of emptiness? How could there be nothing in the moment but somebody noticing the moment? Right? This is pretty much kind of like how nihilism kind of breaks. This nihilistic perception is 1/4 of reality. You know? That means if somebody says to me, you know, I think everything is nothing, you know, I'll be like, you're 1/4 correct. If somebody says, I think everything is everything, you know, I'll be like, okay, you're 1/4 correct. Right? If somebody says, I think it's just good and bad, it's like, you're 1/4 correct. And if somebody says, I think it's infinite, I think we're this consciousness that is actually boundaryless, but it's forgotten. It's as if we have a deep. It's like deep down the memories of the human body are the memories of the earth. The genetics is behaving in accordance to its environment. The environment is the world's, is the planet's mind. The planet is not speaking through language to human beings. The planet is speaking through the environments and scenarios that the human experience is put through physically. What I'm trying to say, that if a person, I'm going to go back to the title, if a person, whoever you are listening or whatever, I'm just thinking like, okay, human archetype, whatever it may be. Everybody has a different DNA, everybody has a different history, background. So everybody has their own walk in life. So, everybody, that means everybody's walking in a way in life that only they have seen. We're like the timeless witness of our past, present, and future self simultaneously. What I would like to see is that the species attempting its greatest potential being an implication that we have to wonder about what the advance would be. So it's as if we're being a human being and we're wondering about, okay, what does it mean to be an advanced human being? And then we realize the human being is dependent on the world. So the most advanced human being is the conscious experience of the most advanced world. But to also be an advanced human being means a human being that instead of reacting unconsciously to its limitation, it consciously responds to the possibility of the limitlessness of the moment. That means if I have a limitless mind right now, that means I don't have a personality because the attention is not limited. You see, in the Yoga Patanjali Sutras, this ancient Vedic text, there's this idea that consciousness is like a glass sphere, like a glass orb, moving around colored surfaces. It's another way of saying, like right now, me giving this talk, my consciousness, think of it as if I'm just saying, if somebody's giving a podcast, it's like their mind is like a glass orb, and then whatever's moving in the moment is passing. It's like a metaphor that consciousness is never what it is experiencing. The essence of consciousness. There's something here that is not physical, and that's what awareness of mind means. So it's like we thought we're just creatures that are embodied. We thought the soul was just in the body. Who says the soul is not treating space as the body, which is the idea of the mind? There is an advanced potential. It's like right now it's 2022 is that year in history where their genius was hiding. The genius decisions on a global level were hiding. That means civilization has not cared for its greatest outcome. That means ignorance. Right, so the species is pretty much the future generations. They're going to see they're going to see all the blind spots of the past generations, and they're going to actually see how cruel and how kind we were. I'm telling you, it's like what kindness is that the person is honoring the unknown within every moment. Rather than self-simulating what the moment has to be, or the person has to be. The nature of the mind is that it's a universal event. So our power is limited to the power of how the universe is happening in one moment. When I say in the subtitle, we understand concepts like people, I'm saying there is an ability to personify a subject, and there is an ability to emotionally interact with this personified subject, or in some sense, like the person can choose to not have an emotion at all. Right, what I'm trying to say is when you become acquainted that the intelligence in the moment of the human being is divided between an observing experiencer, there's an experiential observer, and then there's the existentially observed. So it's another way of saying we are watching ourselves into a moment of meaning. Our consciousness is interacting with reality. Sensory information is becoming story. Language is very important. The way I have managed is that it's the idea of mysteries. Like Tom, that character in the movie Castaway could have just been like, okay, instead of losing my human sanity and making a volleyball into a person, what if I just wondered about the most complex problems to solve as an existential being? You know, every moment of life is an exploration of our activity. What I'm saying is that we have to be grateful that we are present in a possibility where the species can interact. And the idea should be that everybody should be seen as an unknown attention moving a known body. I think this attitude is very healthy. That means which is more honest. We realize in the middle of nowhere we named everything. You know, but at the same time realizing like there's a kind of nameless experiential way that the world is happening. There's a massive meaninglessness here, and the species tries to hide from it by masquerading in the theater of, the stories of an individual human life. Right, it's like the more the species idolizes individualism, the less it's realizing that collectivism means the potential of all individuals. An advanced system means a system that is wondering about what's the most advanced thing we can do. Pretty much, if these Mr.Within talks inspire the species to just wonder about its advancement as a potential of the lifetime, kind of like, again, I'm like this energy, what do I do with this energy? What's the value of the vision, right? What's the value of the inner realms? What's the value of the mind projecting possibilities to how the moment can happen in the future when in the present it's existing in a certain way, right? The mind is, it's like where attention goes, the brain finds an opportunity to resimulate. Human loneliness means the brain is left in empty space. That means really it's like you can say, to be a philosopher is to be somebody who has discovered the loneliness of consciousness, biased by its own exposure to reality. So what I mean by this is that we are like something small happening. We're like a small event taking place inside a big event. And this small event has become conscious that there's a big event. Now it's trying to interact with the big event, not realizing to access the bigger event of consciousness means to not be consciousness. So to be human is kind of like a radio frequency where the radio station is playing this song, this song of manifestation. Whatever it is, it's like the unknown is. This is what I've realized, that it's like the scholars are all staring at the unknown. The unknown is where greatness is waiting to happen. Can you imagine they ask a person, "What's your belief system?" And the person's like, "I'm an unknown being," and they're like, "What do you mean?" And the person's like, "Just like an unknown video game character, Every person's mind is how their intelligence has happened so far. To wonder about just as a common sense idea for the person to wonder, okay, if I want to advance the body, there's physical exercise, but if I want to advance the mind, what is there to do for that? And really what the mind is think of it this way, a system that is trying to archive experience ideologically. It's like eyes open, world is found, like a world is noticed, and then the image of that world is left to, in some sense, interact with how our past sees the world. What is fascination but an emotion where there is no thought in the moment? Imagine becoming fascinated of how you have access to your mind and nobody else on the planet can access your mind like you're accessing. So it's as if we're stationed not in just a biological interface, but into a psychologically subjective, image-oriented. Right, for me, like some of my metaphysical experiences have been me closing my eyes and my attention moving as a geometrical shape. You know? It's as if they ask the person, hey man, why don't you get emotional? And the person's like, I'm just geometry in space, man. It's like everything is change, right? Everything is changing. It's like, what's the value of a changing world? It's like where our attention goes. What I have realized is that that there is a sort of sacrifice of decency for a desire for the artificial. What I feel is the most advanced position for human intelligence is not a position that is bound by one room or ideological context, but a position of intelligence that is noticing. Imagine every ideological system on the planet being like a server, being an ideological server, and you can enter that server and live in that reality. You know, we need to get the species to be capable to be fascinated by questions more than answers. When we want life to be an answer, we fight over truth. But when we wonder about, okay, let's say we found an answer, but there's so many questions to reality. Just being conscious in an unknown world means your life is problem solving every moment. Literally, that's what the energy is here for. The energy is here to observe reality and then interact, but its interaction could be unconscious or it could be conscious. You know, and in reality, we have such trust in the unconscious, and that's why we're being very easily conscious beings. It's very remarkable. It's not just like how visible body is in the moment, but how is an invisible attention animating the meaning of the body, of the visible body. You see, there's mysteries here. The species is acting like it knows everything just because there's the internet, but exploration is something that has to be experiential. You know? Right now, the economical system is occupying all the time that the educational system should be using to discover new conception. You know, it's like the world is missing out on explorers because the explorers want to be followers. You know, it's as if you're alive once. How will your energy walk this realm? You know, pilot itself in the space-time continuum. To be a natural being means that there is something to love. You know, one of the blessed advantages of human beings alive in 2022 is that we have not forgotten nature. We're like nature that has stepped out of nature. But our minds are naturally happening, and that means there's a field. You know, so I think this has to do something with how the future generations are going to find a way to attribute psychology to electromagnetism, right? Like, let's say electromagnetic fluctuations in the moment can somehow be ascribed a sort of psychological value, like a persona. Answers close worlds, questions open them. And I want to get the educational system to make the future generations fascinated with all that we don't know yet, right? Imagine in the future educational systems pay children with cryptocurrency. And the greater the discovery and the contribution of the person towards the intellectual domains and systems of humanity. A smart species is a species that has tried to find the most accurate context before it conceptualizes. I want to see advancement kind of like how, it's like the way I want people to have a relationship with their minds is very similar to how Tony Stark was having a relationship with Jarvis. Like that AI computer where Tony Stark could just raise his hand and the AI would adjust his, inner vision to that. So what does that mean is that the mind is not us, but the mind is an assistant. Every person's intelligence is how the universe is assisting them. Whatever reasons there may be, let's say we say that, let's say we think of us, whether Mad Max post-apocalyptic scenario, or we just think of what will an evil humanity, like literally Batman, Gotham City was like an evil kind of society, But what I'm trying to say is that evil is chaos. Chaos is the absence of order. Chaos doesn't have an experience of time. Right? So my view is that instead of me having an opinion on the world, I realize that every person is an unknown being. I've simplified it that way. Because if I give a value on that person, I have trapped their impression. I have linked the impression of them. It's like believing in somebody. It's like having an impression on someone and thinking that impression is them is equivalent to somebody worshiping an idol. What I'm trying to say is that if our strategy through knowledge is not leading to efficiency, we have to, it's kind of like this ancient saying about enlightenment, they say, where it's like you don't chase the butterfly, or because you'll be a step behind karmically, or instead you sit still and silent. It's as if when the world has stopped to have meaning, that's like the mind being like, okay, time to re-clarify the existential position. You have to sit down, be still with your world. Take the loneliness as an opportunity to wonder about the totality of the advancement of your intellect. You see, it's as if life is not just emotions. Life is also mysteries of geometry. It's a geometrical mystery as much as it's an emotional relationship with space. I'll share something with viewers. There was a time where I wasn't having a good day, and my mind suddenly projected this idea that I felt there was no value to existence. And in that moment, I realized the moment I consider there's no value, the brain is contrasting into a world with value. It's realizing like on the other side of your suffering is the efficient algorithm. For me, it's I don't know how savage the species is going to be, and I don't know how gentle it can be. All I know is that human beings seek an ideological purpose because a physical purpose is not enough. That means people, because the idea of us being a self in a world is like a character in a story, people are seeking for the ultimate story. And usually when something intense happens, the human intelligence shakes to reposition itself. what I'm trying to say is that whatever state you're in as a being, there's always an ability to wonder about what does the world mean in the moment. This is the start of mysticism. Mysticism is when the human being has found an ability to wonder about what it is, actually. In order to do that, the most obvious station is the person has to revert or whatever. You have to find the simplest, most honest way you can just be in the moment without any idea or opinion. You gotta find the simplest, most natural like self, right? That means there's no resistance. There's nothing challenging the moment. The moment is just simply being. When that moment can abide by convert into a stillness, then there suddenly comes this realization that there, in the moment of our consciousness, there is a noticing of what is noticing. So it's some scholars have called this the awareness of awareness, right? So you begin to notice that, okay, you don't just have access to a first-person point of view of reality from your biological eyes, but you can close your eyes and envision phenomena with visible form. That means imagination is visible, but it's not tangible. I could imagine like a apple pie in the sky, but I could also imagine, I can imagine a pie in the sky, but I can't eat from that pie. So I have access to the content of the mind as a strangely visually, right? The mind is like a sort of sight that doesn't need light to bring in forth image. So what I'm saying is that a human being, when they come to loneliness, really, if they become responsible for the loneliness, it turns into isolation. When it turns into isolation, the person is ultimately like wondering about the context of their whole moment. Now then, it's as if the person has access to infinite ways that their behavior can happen, and the person's like, okay, what way do I choose? And this is where I would say honesty reveals the purpose of behind. It's like there's something about nature that when it doesn't resist itself, it's giving itself a permission to happen freely. In Taoism, this is really deeply understood. That means anybody who sees a Taoist, it's like to the Taoist, there's no one who can ever be rude. Right? There's in some sense, like, you see, the value of emptiness is that what is moving the moment. Friedrich Nietzsche even said it, right? He was like, if a tree falls in a forest and there was no one there to see it, right, or to hear it, did the tree fall? Really, the meaning of life seems to be just this, to discover the consciousness that we are. It's like the person's like, whoa, am I existing right now? Whoa, am I conscious that I'm experiencing? Whoa, do I have access to inner symbolism simultaneously? That means the mind has an ability to look at an object and be like, this isn't an object, this is a bench. Right? The person can turn meaningless matter into subjective context, emotionally accessible context. Subject. So what I'm saying is, the Buddha had this saying, which always, like, it was very profound for me. He said, you're born alone, you die alone, and everything else in between is a blessing. Right? So this man's view, the Buddha, people don't know, but the Buddha had experienced like next level states of human loneliness. Like, there's a story to Buddha where it's kind of like it makes the person emotional. Like, there should be a great film made on this, or maybe the film is made, I don't know. But the idea is that Buddha, before he sat by the tree and attained enlightenment, discovered nirvana, the Buddha, in some sense, had taken a misleading path, as if imagine somebody trying to find truth. And back in the day, there was a practice called I don't know if I can pronounce it. Asceticism. Okay, there we go. So what the whole ascetic practice was that the Buddha pretty much found a bunch of people, right? Just like how parents say, be careful of bad friends. The Buddha found a bunch of ascetic people who their belief was that if they starve themselves, they get to experience divinity, right? And the Buddha, he falls into this path where he's just starving himself, and he reaches a point suddenly where he's doing this, let's say, Brahmanistic ascetic practice, and he realizes he is too weak to stand up. Like, he realizes what he's doing is pretty stupid, and he realizes he's too weak to even change the path that his karma brought him to, right? And then the story is so profound, because out of nowhere this little girl appears and gives Buddha a bowl of rice, puts a bowl of rice in front of Buddha, which can't move, right? Out of nowhere. And Buddha eats that rice and comes back to life, right? And he realizes the mistake of blind ritualism. I mean, that moment where the Buddha was like, I don't have the energy to move. And at the same time, he was like, I've made a mistake, right? That was the moment where the Buddha, the moment he realized it was a mistake, was the moment that something could happen in the moment, And so Buddha, he goes through many journeys, because the time Buddha was born, people already had an approach to truth, and it was Brahmanic ritualism. People look at esoteric societies nowadays and they're like, what are these strange rituals? But in reality, when you look at the ancient world, it's like that was the whole point of language entering the mind. It was the magic of psychological display. So what I'm trying to say is that human behavior, just like the animal body was unconscious, then we became a conscious controller of it. Similarly, ideologically, the moment has been unconscious. And when we become conscious of the ideology, we're separating ourselves from the infinite context of it, I don't know. I feel like ultimately what I'm saying is that human beings can extract personification values. Like we can turn an object into a person. Like Walt Disney did that. They personified like a table, like a candle. So similarly, I'm saying that it's like we can personify conception, and even though a person physically, let's say they are alone, their mind is in the same place that every person's mind is, right? So the mysteries of an unknown world are the explorations of all of us. Just like in current, let's say, economic industry, there's products that are enhancing and advancing our lives. Those products are like, I'm trying to think, like it's like if the species cared for its greatness, efficiency would be the first priority. Multidimensional tolerance, we just have to realize that everything, reality is happening through multiple dimensions at the same time. So just like an object can be looked at from multiple angles, every moment, every sense of self in a moment can be, repositioned through attention. It's like we're an actor in a film, we're not directing, but we're suddenly realizing we can direct our own film inside a film, we're not directing. In the outer realms, we're internally simulating meaning to matter. We can say the concept of God even has the geometry of attributing a personified intelligence to space. You see, there was this quote by Plato. He says, "As above, so below," and Mandelbrot in mathematics discovered the fractal. The geometrical interpretation of that quote. And the idea is that whatever we do and whatever the macrocosm does, or whatever many dimensions there may be to reality, it's all happening at once. That's the common denominator. In an instantaneous, unknown way, attention and existence are being the freedom to animate. So I'm saying human loneliness converts into the unknown witness's isolation. So it's as if you're an intelligence here as a being, and you're wondering, okay, in this lifetime, let me see. It's as if every person's living life to get to see themselves for the first time every day. You see, like, that's the nature of being a human being. We're watching ourselves as much as we're acting as the main character of it. Right? And it's like, from a person seeking a singular truth, you just realize, whoa, what's the point of God creating so many different kind of flowers, For me, every person just being cloned into an ideological system, it's like, imagine the sunflower is suddenly all the flowers on the planet have to just be the sunflower. Like, a part of us would be like, then what was the point of the novelty, What's the point of God creating more than one human being to experience the test of reality? Right, and it's as if we are in the garden of existence. That's the beauty of civilization. We turned the jungle into a garden. We created a sort of interaction of a more able mind within some sense a lesser space. So pretty much just in this episode, I'm just saying that the same fulfillment that a human being can get from another human being, if there's an existential situation or circumstance, or even the lockdown of the virus epidemics or whatever, right? It's as if the person has an opportunity to get to discover their own nature. Ultimately, what life is we wake up, we log into reality every day, and we are experiencing the new live stream of our existence, right? So it's as if we are experiencing not just what we are, but the potential of it to move in the space that it has become conscious of. Morihei Ueshiba says, always keep your mind. Morihei Ueshiba, guys, is the founder of Aikido. He says, always keep your mind as bright and clear as the vast sky, the great ocean, and the highest peak, empty of all thoughts. Always keep your body filled with light and heat. Fill yourself with the power of wisdom and enlightenment. Exactly. He's like, you're a temporary being of wonder about the value of life, Now, what's the greatest value of an individual? It has to be a collective event. It's kind of like we have to attempt to build an advanced civilization as a sort of being grateful for the advantage of being capable to move towards one. Advance toward it. That means we're advancing towards advancement. That's the true nature of mankind. We're going to be the brightest intelligence in this universal sector. The advanced civilization is going to be the most fascinating event in nature. Reality is fascinating. Like, we need the whole species to act as like hunter-gatherers of the inner realms. Every person has to, in some sense, journal their pretty much like a hunter. Like, you got to go find novelty in your own individual, in your inner realm, and then try to wonder about its value in the outer realm, right? Because in reality, there's this quote from Swami Krishnananda where he says, once you discover the inseparability of the individual and individual activity and cosmic activity, meditation stops. And What does that mean? That means the moment you realize you're being the whole moment, the behavior in the moment doesn't matter. That's the nature of attention. Right now, I'm me saying that I'm a personality speaking to you, and me saying that I'm an unknown attention, just noticing the present move is the same, right? It's like the same being. Like I'm being an unknown observer of how this biological organism that I am is knowing itself. So it's as if it's like the body is in the awareness that is being my mind in the whole moment. So the way I have wondered about the nature of my own mind, where I was like, okay, if there was nothing I could do, what could I do? And I realized that it's just the origin of energy in the moment. That means a person's karma is another way of saying what sort of energetic rhythms are moving in their experience. You know, what has the attention made itself worthy of, right? Because we have to realize to be a mind is to be many moments at the same time. That's the whole point of memory, you know. And isn't it fascinating that the brain is designed in a way that we can't like remember? I shouldn't say we can't, but let's say if somebody was asked on the spot, like, do you remember 252 days ago, like what you had for dinner, right? Right? It's as if that we don't have that in our memory, but it's kind of like the human behavior being something that it communicates, but it also advances forth, right? We're moving past our findings. And I think it's a really like cool argument, right? Where the person's like, why shouldn't there be why should there be an advanced civilization? And then somebody being like, why shouldn't there be? Why shouldn't we all be experiencing the most advanced possibility of experiencing life on Earth? Right? Like, what have the leaders of the world been doing when we need everybody's contribution? It's as if we need everybody's what it means to have, what it means for there to be 8 billion human beings on Earth is 8 billion angles and views towards Earth. And intelligence means the realization of one's views. And loneliness is when you're left to viewing how yourself is being present in the moment. And you're going to realize something hilarious. Does an enlightened being, would an enlightened being have the concept of enlightenment? Would an enlightened being care for enlightenment? Would an honest being try to be honest? Would an evil being try to be evil? What I'm trying to say is that there's some level where attention is contacting instantaneously existence, and the way attention is being instantaneously existence is so pure that no conceptual context of good or evil can touch it, right? So it's as if God is beyond the karma of man's mind. All I'm trying to point to is that sometimes I've just looked at my life and I've been like, okay, what is consciousness but like an infinite effort to problem solve till the end of time? Literally what it means to be, what the ideal of the species, trying to pass the test of outer extinction, right? Like the immortal, like our species right now has an immortal vision of itself. People may say there isn't immortal beings, but there's 100% immortal views. We could just, the concept of infinity is an immortal geometry, it's an immortal endless abstraction. What I have realized is that life sometimes brings a person to a moment where it's not showing them their limitlessness 24/7, but it's showing them their limitation. Why? Because there's a karma. And what karma means is how have you been involved in the moment that you experienced? That means what caused the attention to value itself to access such a possibility of reality? It's like, the person being like, when it's like, imagine a young kid, right? And, in an advanced civilization, somebody goes up to a young kid and it's like, hey, young kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? And this young kid says, I want to be the most advanced being in this universal sector. And that's when we'll know the future generations have an ambition. Not just one step ahead, 2 steps ahead, not any sort of slow pace. For me, what it is I feel that we have to speed up the psychological redemption of the species, and the fastest way is to consider that whatever has happened, the past is past, the future awaits, and the present is what we're equipped with. The present, to be alive in a present moment, is to have access to dimensions that are projected by your intent and not projected by your intent. Sometimes I have this feeling existence is like imagination. I don't have to imagine. It's geometry before projected geometry to create subjective meaning over the object. So I'm saying that the species is going to notice the unknown. It's going to notice that we're all living inside a language story, a story of reality, linguistic simulation. Now, to become more aware of this limitation, it's like the responsibility of an explorer. So if you're somebody who explore reality and you find a value, like I'm going to share this story with you, which is pretty much going to share it. I'm just going to tell you what I mean. You have to share the world. So I'm going to end this episode off with a story. There's this story of these Sufi dervishes. These 3 Sufi dervishes, these 3 Sufi friends. Okay, and Sufism is this, it's its unique ideology, but I'll say this, that, just a second. Imagine these 3 mystics, okay? These 3 mystic friends, okay? They're these 3 Sufi dervishes, let's say in their mid-20s. These 3 friends suddenly notice a giant wall has appeared out of nowhere at the edge of their town, and all 3 of them go walk to the wall. And they, in some sense, they automatically find each other at the wall, and then in some sense they start walking on the side of this wall to see like where's the edge of this wall, this ridiculously giant wall that has appeared. Now suddenly, as they're walking, these 3 friends see this giant ladder that is going to the top of the wall. And the 3 friends, Sufi friends, and these 3 mystics look at the ladder, and they're like, okay, so let's climb it. So one of them decides to climb it first, and this is very important in the story, that when the first friend is climbing, the other 2 are holding the ladder. So the other 2 hold the ladder. The first friend finds certainty and trust that he can climb the ladder. He climbs to the top of this giant wall, and on the other side of the wall, as the story has it, there is a dimension of paradise. That means it's heaven on the other side of it. And so the first friend he gets so fascinated by this heavenly dimension, by paradise, that he jumps into paradise, right? That means he just jumps to the other side of the wall, and it's like this heavenly garden, okay? Now, the first friend jumps, doesn't say a single word, and the 2 friends are like, WTF, what do we do now? And so the second friend goes up the ladder, and keep in mind, now there's only 1 person holding the ladder. The second friend courageously goes up the ladder, and he gets to the top, and he realizes what there's this like great heavenly dimension on the other side of the wall. And so he just looks down, at the friend that's at the bottom, and he says, hey man, there's paradise up here on the other side of this wall the first friend jumped into, I'm gonna jump to. And at least he passed across the message. Some level of honor maintained. Now this is where the story gets very fascinating, because the third friend realizes there's no one to hold the ladder. And he just trusts the ladder, he trusts the moment, and he starts climbing. And he gets to the top, and he sees the heavenly, he sees the garden of paradise, and he sees the other two friends in that garden. And he just looks at himself and he says, oh my God, paradise is here. And instead of jumping in, if before he was nervously climbing up towards the ladder, now he's just with blissed out, happy, as if he can, and he just looks at, he's there like, oh my God. The third friend just shouts, there's paradise up here. The whole world should know. That's the moral of the story. The whole world should know there's paradise up here. Right, and in life, whoever you are, the concept of the paradise beyond the wall, well, is a suggestion of your inner realms, the value of your mind. Right, you could choose to just silently live life without anybody knowing who you were behind your eyes. You can choose to live life in accordance to like passing on a message, like writing a book or something, and still be living a silent life, right? Or you can choose to attempt the advance. It's as if our ability to understand how reality is happening counteracts our fear, which was trying to ignore how the unknown is in the moment. There's many things that are happening in unknown ways that we don't even have conceptual human language for. Language is something that the future generations have to realize. They should make it mandatory that before any person graduates any class, any grade or whatever part of the educational system, they have to create a new concept. You know, or even like PhD students have to create new concepts before any sort of degree is granted to anyone. You see, it's novelty. The world is too big to put it into just language, so we have to use language as a suit, right? I'm kind of like just the caveman, just like how the cavemen use sticks and stones to make fire. I'm trying to use like language and perception to be like, okay, what happens to the nature of the mind when it has access to multiple perspectives at the same time, but at the same time can acknowledge the emptiness of space, can acknowledge the dualistic nature of reality and the infinitude of that duality. We don't know how advanced the world is going to be, but we can expect its influence based on, in some sense, an energetic behavior. That means it's as if sometimes I look at my life and I'm like, it's like what I am as a being is like this instrument, and sometimes it's creating an inner music, an inner melody, and an outer melody. Sometimes the mind is moving faster than the body, and there's moments where the mind and body are moving at the same pace, and moments where the body moves faster than the mind. The mind is stationed as an observer of it. So when I say we're pilots of consciousness, we're literally piloting our attention in the space-time continuum. You know, to take advantage of our vision is to care for, like, okay, how great could this human system be? Like, we have to care for it, because then, how it's like people are like, I honor my ancestors, but I don't care for them, you know? I don't want, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, we have to preserve the efficiency of the past, but we also need to have space for novelty of the future, so we're left being a consciousness is acknowledging multiple dimensions in the moment. This is the only way we can free ourselves from judging people based on one dimension, which leads to like savage reasoning. There's savageness, and then there's savage reasoning, where the person is not understanding the nature of chaos. The whole point, like in Greek mythology, the whole world was chaos first, and then order came, right? And so it was this idea that we are the order and the chaos of the cosmos, right? That's the whole point of human civilization. It's a way we are. It's a sort of style our species is carrying itself in the void. What I'm trying to say is, whatever state of mind you're in, honesty seems to be trying to find the simplest moment where all the complex can be valued instantly. What if we're free in ways that the idea of freedom cannot even capture? What if there is so many ways that the idea of freedom can be reconceptualized in accordance to just a view of human attention? Right, I'm pretty much standing here giving a talk, right? But at the same time being like, there's 8 billion ways that human beings are approaching and interacting with reality. Now, there's no way we can create one ideological system. So it's in some sense, instead of forcing people into belief systems of specific behavior, instead we say that humanity has access to like a bunch of archetypes. We equip people's minds with approaches of perception. It's like we're trying to create a database of human perspective. I think that's a cool way of seeing it, right? Like, what is the value of an inner life of a human being and the outer life? The outer life is like the physical, energetic value. The inner life is, what's the point of being an energetic being in a cosmos? It's like, what's the point of having consciousness, right? The person's like, why did we evolve to notice we're watching the world, right? That means there's something that the watcher requires to do. It's like the meaning of life shifts from an ideological to truth to a sort of, an experiential vision. The unknown is like the mind, the ego giving itself a permission to be like, okay, I have no idea what's happening, let me reset, People are like, yo, what is meditation? Oh yeah, it's watching our own mind like a cinema. Like we're in the cinema watching a film. When you can watch the film of your mind, you'll realize why in the Upanishads, this ancient Vedic text, they said the seal of the seen is unseen. That means that the species has to acquaint itself with the unknown variables of the moment as much as the known variables. What the idea of comfort zone means is that the brain is entranced by a pattern of familiarity, right? We have to expect the unexpected, because the moment we don't expect the unexpected, we're trapped in our expectations. So I ask myself, does it make sense that when I see people, I take whatever their behavior is as an impression of who they are, or do I consider every person's value based on their future potential rather than their past behavior? And the idea is, what choice do we have, right? We want to build an advanced civilization as soon as possible, so we have to wonder about what is the most advanced state that human beings can be in, because everybody is a unique DNA. The nature of reality is to kind of like share your greatest self with the greatest world, right? Like that should be the attitude. Why? Because why not? Why not wonder about advancement when we can? Reality is not just a scientific, psychological event. It is a very, what really philosophy means is that the character in the story is wondering about the limitations of how its characteristic is based on a view of the world. Every person has experienced enough life to be capable of sitting down or buying a sketchbook, right? And being able to write, right? For me, writing, I was like, I got the clue from religion. I'm like, okay, there's something divine about writing. So let me experience moments where I write, and I came to realize that it's like coordinated levels of effort. It's literally like attention moves, then the energy of the intent has a possibility to happen. I want 8 billion human beings to behave like 8 billion researchers of what the most advanced way life can happen, what the most advanced civilization can be. I feel the advanced civilization is the greatest winning idea. That means all ideological systems on the planet, I'm that guy in history saying they will all come to the advanced, they will all come meet at the advanced civilization. They're all destined for that. It's either we don't get to see how advanced humanity could be, or it's as if, okay, we endured inefficiency until our eyes closed. It's like how great, it's like foolishness is kind of fascinating, but the foolishness of a species is kind of sad, Right now, imagine, just like we have borders between nations, we have every person's brain simulating themselves as a persona, therefore implying that in some sense a sort of, it's like becoming a position in space. Right now, what the personality in the outer realms is how much the inner realms could trust to express what was there. What it means to be a soul is to realize that you are being an unknown attention to a known reality. Like, that's the cool thing about life. Like, it's that deep. Do you know? It's as if what is more spiritual, wondering about where the world came from, or wondering about where the self came from. Imagine somebody's like, yo man, in my past life I was an emperor. And the other person's like, yo man, in my past life I wasn't in this world. I was beyond this world. It's kind of cool. Our species is not just pioneering cyberspace, but it's also pioneering artificial coping with nature, right? So we have to be able to acknowledge that there's a spectrum of behavior. If behavior leads to that identity of the action, then it's like to get the species to care about how we all have an ability to see something new, as long as the human being has an ability to grow. Like, there's an ability for new structures of new ways that the species can design its own greatness. Imagine every human being trying to advance whatever work they were doing on the planet, just trying to do the most advanced, and they would eventually realize the greatness of the individual activity is the greatness of the cosmic activity, because you can't be great if the world isn't. That's the reality of greatness. We are in the shadow of something, of potential that is way brighter than how life is happening now. But ultimately, whatever state of mind we're in, we gotta be like, what does the human species deserve? And we're like, okay, because this human species has managed to be silly and have humor, like it's managed to preserve some sort of decency of living in life, right? I have realized that it gets boring to fear the world. It gets really boring to fear the world is to escape it by living in another world. But in reality, what is the point of consciousness? To experience how existence is happening. So if we can cultivate the ability that we're not a person in the moment, we are the presence of our whole moment and how it's instantaneously being. Like, if we can cultivate this, they call this Satchidananda, and it's hilarious. Why? Because it's the realization of consciousness, that because there's consciousness, there's existence, and there's nothing more blissful than that. Than the realization that our attention is what creates the world subjectively. I'm telling you, we're unknown beings. Every person has to, wonder about the advancement of their own mind, because they're the only ones who have access to it. If we were a telepathic society, I wouldn't need to give this thought. The inner realms would be accessible, but right now we're living in a phase of history prior to the era of collective mindhood. Space is the clue to why something should happen here, because there's the space for it to happen. There is a space, there is enough room, there's 100% a way where all human beings can value life in accordance to identification with their species. Because what's the point of looking like each other? What's the point of having similar genetical pattern and similar skeletal structures? Like why do we as creatures in the world have the same geometry, right? So that's a union factor. So it's an idea of being like, okay, we look like each other geometrically. So because geometrically the species is similar, there's an instant union. But then the greater instantaneous union is how all psychological, let's say, programs of behavior are happening in the void. The unknown is that moment where the scholar of knowledge realizes there's mysteries to how experience is being present. And so that's when, the sages say there's two things you can do in life. You can trust it or distrust it. And what I'm saying is that we can only trust it, because why else is it here? Why are we in a world, like what's the point of being conscious in a world you can't trust, right? That's why we have to build an advanced civilization, right? To create an environment where the future generations can trust enough to unravel their genius. Pretty much to be great in the present is hilariously like preparing for the greatness of the future generations, whatever sort of strategy that means. Human beings all over the planet. Imagine like the vision of School of Athens 2.0, or like there's schools of advanced communication all over the planet, human beings gathered around, and it was as if each mind in the room was like a dimension of its own response to the moment. We are not just human beings, we are the ability, the force that moves this human being. We are the spirit of the species and all this. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. And whoever you are, we have one lifetime to not just get to see what our most advanced self is, but we also have one lifetime to appreciate what we are, right? There's moments where I feel complete emptiness, and then I'm like, yo man, I'm existing right now. I'm being in the moment. Intelligence is present. Consciousness has access to a room, and also has access to the inner realm's abstraction to reprobabilize the moment. There's many ways our attention can move, and our discovery of our own eyes is like finding the hiding place of truth. Much blessings. Namaste. Thanks for listening, guys. Blessings. Rise, mankind, rise.